I am at this point going to be handing it over. We are going to talk about an investigation of the economics of data sharing and automated compliance by design. And here to moderate, back to the stage, please welcome Hubert Tardieu.
With me, and you start the day again with me today. What we have decided to do this morning in this first session is to do some kind of a wrap-up of what you have heard yesterday, and the concept have been popping up like the one of orchestrator. Time now to put that in context. And to do that, we have been asking the main participant to what we call the Gaia-X Institute to give you the basis and the concept, the scheme, which is existing for economics of data sharing. So what is the Gaia-X Institute? Gaia-X has decided 2 years ago that in order to anticipate the future world, which is arriving in terms of data space, it was useful to work jointly with the academic world for advanced topics which were not yet part of the day-to-day objective of the management of Gaia-X. In such a way, we can prepare the future. And the two topics which have been chosen are economics of data sharing. We have shared at several occasions the fact that we, the government in Europe and the European Commission, have already spent probably 1.7 billion euro to facilitate the creation of data space. And you would agree with me, it's important we understand how the economics of data sharing is working. And we have had yesterday unfortunate illustration of that point with Ag Data Hub, which is obliged to stop operation because of a lack of cash after 3 years of existence. So we will come back onto that. On this topic, we have been working closely since 2 years with Université Paris-Dauphine, and Université Paris-Dauphine will be the first to intervene this morning to explain this economics of data sharing. The second topic on which we have been working, and this time with University of Dortmund and Fraunhofer, we will have a presentation by Jacob Rehoff, who is driving the Gaia-X Institute, and Pierre Grandlier, our Chief Innovation Officer, about the second topic on which we have been concentrating since 2 years, which is automated compliance by design. So, without further ado, I would like to immediately hand over to Université Paris-Dauphine, and I would like to call on stage Luca Eustache and Joël Toledano. Joël is an emeritus professor at Paris-Dauphine. Joël has been also for 7 years a member of ARCEP, the regulation authority in France for telecom. And Luca is a PhD student, and both of them, with Eric Brousseau, have been the one creating this position paper. They will comment their position paper, but they will also give you the main lessons of the economic theater that we have had yesterday, where 4 projects which have been candidate to show how their economics was working. They have had each of them 1 hour to explain how this economics is working and to be challenged by the representative of Paris-Dauphine how that has a chance to succeed or whether it is a risky proposition. I would like to hand over. Is it you, Luca? Please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Hubert, for this nice introduction. So I will start by presenting you this position paper, and then Joël will present you the feedback of the economic theater of yesterday. So, okay. So what we did is trying to address the big elephant in the room, which is economics of data sharing and economics of data ecosystem. To do so, we started this study 2 years ago with the Gaia-X Institute, and we use as a methodology semi-structured interviews. We go to see data sharing ecosystem and orchestrator to see how those things were working. And we run like 20 interviews during 48 hours. This process was iterative, meaning we go see people, try to put some analysis and theory behind, and then see them again to confront our study with their thinking about that. And the main objective was to really understand and to dig into the economics of data sharing, the economics of data ecosystem. And we did it at 2 levels. The first level is the participant one, why people join data sharing ecosystem, how they create value, what is the use case that they are setting up. And the second level is the organization of data sharing and the organization of use case and the ecosystem by the orchestrator. For sure, this study was made possible by the support of the Gaia-X Institute and for sure by the support of interviewee and their precious time in helping us to understand this complex world of data sharing ecosystem. So I want to first begin by a typology and definition to be sure that we are on the same warning. We try to use the most neutral language that we can find. And we identify some categories of actors within the data sharing ecosystem. The first category is mainly the participant. The participants, you know them, they are firms that exchange data, that use services to enhance and develop their core activities. And what is important there is like often they are both user and provider within the data sharing ecosystem. The second type of big player that we isolate in the data sharing ecosystem are for sure the so-called orchestrator. So we try to put a definition which is quite clear and also concise, but the orchestrator is the actor that coordinates use case by use case, that is coordinating the overall data sharing ecosystem. And to do so, he has a mission, which is orchestration, and we can identify 2 types of orchestration. The first of all is maybe the most known among you, is the technical orchestration. It's providing the technical tools that make data sharing possible, and those tools has to be tailored to participants, to their maturity, to their profile, and to the use case. The second type of orchestration that we can isolate from the interviews was the strategic orchestration. Now this is, if you have the technique, it's possible to share data, but now you need to bring everyone at the table to make them want to share data, basically. And this is the role of the strategic orchestration. And the last term that we want to elicit here is the governance. The governance is where stakeholders use a set of rules to align the interests and mitigate potential conflict. This is a simple definition of a term that sometimes is a bit vague and overused, so we try to be as clear as possible. So if we begin now by the core of the analysis, the first theoretical classification that we can make of a data sharing ecosystem is a long-term process of innovation. The first thing that I want to call here is the long term. Building a data sharing ecosystem is not a story of days or months. It's a story of years, and it needs to be setting up as a long-term process at the beginning. It allows me to bring the second point of a long-term process of innovation. You need at the first moment a vision, meaning someone that takes a decision to create a data sharing ecosystem in the long run with a strategic vision of where they want to go. And the innovation part in this definition says that, in fact, this is also an iterative process, meaning you will start to build an ecosystem, build use cases, and then you will learn about that. You will learn, you will reinforce your practice, you will better know each other, and then you can build on top of that to reach the last point, which is innovation. For sure, this process is costly, and the first investment to create the ecosystem can be huge, and the return can be like few months or especially few years ago, after that. What is important here is to say that, in fact, data sharing as a long-term process of innovation, this is not data transaction. What drives the data sharing process is not the price, but it's really the learning effect and the iterative process that I was mentioning before that will drive the data sharing transaction. But it will be a little bit clearer if I go to the second theoretical framework that we develop to analyze data sharing ecosystem, which is club. In fact, data sharing ecosystem are club, meaning that there is a group, a closed group of participants with a boundary that is more or less, I would say, strict. And the aim of this data sharing ecosystem, and we need to recall it again and again, is to develop use cases. And that's why if data sharing is not data transaction, data sharing ecosystem, they are not data marketplace. This is not about just making the meat of a provider and a user on a price, but here what is important is the onboarding of participant. You need, as a data sharing ecosystem, to onboard the provider, to absorb their cost to share data and to incentivize them to participate, to share their data or their services. But also you need to incentivize a user to join and to help them to set up the use case and to find the suitable provider for their need. And this is really where the value added of a data sharing ecosystem relies. This is not only about the matching platform, but really to help everyone to find their place in the ecosystem and to find a suitable way to create value. And then we have the economic of use case. So use case is just a specific application that aim to create value thanks to the data or services that are shared within the data sharing ecosystem. And those use cases, they can create different level of benefit. The first level, and I will be more precise on that later on, but the first level is about digitalization and the last level is about pure innovation. What is important is like, there is different conditions to set up a use case. Those conditions are, of course, not sufficient, but they are necessary conditions. The first condition, I would say, is to have a sequential approach, meaning to set up a use case and to raise in the typology that we fix, you need to be integrated within the data sharing ecosystem. You need to develop your maturity in terms of data, and you cannot pretend to achieve pure innovation out of nowhere if you are not able to first digitalize your process, automate your process, and reorganize your value chain. This is the first condition. This is a dynamic process that needs to be addressed sequentially. The second condition to set up a good use case rely more on the orchestrator role. That is to say, sometimes people will earn more than the other when it comes to data sharing. And then to set up a viable use case, you need a strategic approach. Strategic approach to be sure that everyone can extract some direct value and that will be able to join the use cases. So if we be more precise on the data sharing benefit. So first of all, we put on the left part of the table the cost, because this is what comes first. To extract value of a use cases, you first need to absorb some cost. The first level that we isolate is the digitalization of data exchange. Here it's quite simple. It's about making things digital, and you will benefit from the traditional benefit of digitalization. It's important to recall here that this digitalization can be made through or within the ecosystem, or this digitalization can be made also by yourself outside of the ecosystem, depending on your level of maturity. For sure, talking about a SME is not the same thing talking about a big tech firms. The second level is once you have digitalized your document, your exchange, you can try to automate them. And then you will benefit from a better flow of information, you will reduce the error rate, but it comes with a cost of modifying the data sharing habits. Once you did that, you will start to save some money, to save some time, some human resources, and then you can think about a more global and more integrated way of creating value, which is reorganizing the overall value chain within the ecosystem, but also outside of the ecosystem, adopting new practices. And here there is a first risk or a first huge cost that can come in place, which is a risk of lock-in effect. At some point, you will begin really integrated within the ecosystem, and for a participant, you will need the guarantee that you will not find yourself stuck in this ecosystem. But you can have in-depth management benefit, which can be really consequent. And on the on the addition of all the earning that you add through those processes, you can start to think about a real innovation. Now you know the people that are in the ecosystem, you know how to share data, you are integrated, and you are able to share even strategic data. So this is where the innovation come in place. You will find some new applications, some new services to develop, maybe the killer app that you need. And you will have the traditional cost of marketing a new product and the traditional benefit of having an innovation. So everything relies on the key player role, which is the orchestrator. He is the one that will coordinate the ecosystem use cases by use cases to be sure that this sequentiality of gain will happen within the ecosystem. So what is important is to recall that it can, and this is often the case, you can have several orchestrators within the same data sharing ecosystem. And for instance, you can have one orchestrator per use cases. What is important is to say that the profile of the orchestrator can be plural. You can have a player that is within the value chain, so one of your concurrents, for instance, if you're a participant, or not. You can have a player that is in dominant position, meaning the big player of the value chain, or not. And sometimes you can even build your data sharing ecosystem against this dominant position of a key actor. And what is important is the business model of this orchestrator. And you have to be open-minded on that, but a data sharing ecosystem orchestrator can have a public, private, or hybrid business model. And this business model issue also has to be addressed dynamically. We can isolate that orchestration is a dynamic process like the data sharing ecosystem, and we can isolate 3 phases. The first is the emergence. Let's say once your first use case is set up, then you have the reaching of the critical mass, meaning you have enough participants or your participant participate enough in the ecosystem to be self-viable, to have enough activities to finance yourself, and then you have enlargement, meaning trying to look for new use cases, new value chain, or to integrate even more the participants that are already present in the data sharing ecosystem. And we can define, because we saw that a lot of you use the matrix that we develop, we can classify those orchestrators based on 2 dimensions. The first dimension is the centrality in the value chain. What is the position of the orchestrator within the value chain? Is a central actor that everyone knows already that has power over the other or not? And the second definition is the alignment of the interest between the different participants of the data sharing ecosystem, meaning those participants are all looking in the same direction, or you need to manage the potential conflict of interest and manage the potential difference between their will. And all of that leads us to the trust, because as I mentioned before, the challenge regarding data sharing ecosystem, they need to be addressed dynamically. And as I also mentioned before, once you will become more and more integrated, some risk or some cost will appear, the cost of being locked in the ecosystem, for instance. And this is where, in economic meaning, the debate around trust comes. In fact, we decided to not use the wording of trust, but we prefer to use mitigation of risk, because this is what it's about. And we can isolate 2 types of major risks that arise in the data sharing ecosystem. The first risk is the technological risk. What if someone misuse or access without my permission to my data? Here we want to be clear. We know that you can have contractual agreement that protect you or protect the other to access your data. Here the risk arises with the question, what if he does anyway? The second risk is a more strategic risk, is related to the opportunistic behavior of a data sharing ecosystem orchestrator. Meaning, once you will become more and more integrated within the data sharing ecosystem, you will start to develop specific assets that cannot be used otherwise. And also cannot be used outside of the ecosystem. So if the data sharing ecosystem orchestrator take this into account, he can use that to extract more and more value about you. So you need, as an orchestrator, to provide the guarantee to your participant that you will not act in the opposite direction of their interest. And this is where you need to put in place some trust mechanism or risk mitigation mechanism. For sure, those risks depend on the level of integration of the participant within the ecosystem. It also depends on the strategicness of data that are shared and the level of activity of the data sharing ecosystem. So what is the solution to implement trust in the data sharing ecosystem? You can have technological solution, and we will hear about it just later on. You can have smart contract, federated learning, but you can also try to implement trust by design, by choosing an architecture that will prevent those risks to appear. But yet, it could arise the business model question. I just want to be clear here. For instance, the status of the DGA aim to put this trust by design in place, and we especially choose to not talk about intermediary, but ecosystem due to the DGA, to not use a word that was already connotated. So if I try to wrap up what I said this morning, first of all, the data sharing ecosystem, there are long-term innovation processes and data club that has to enable use cases in order to appear. And here what is important is to say the data sharing ecosystem comes from the use cases and not the reverse. So first, try to focus on use cases, and then when you have enough use cases, try to build the data sharing ecosystem around, not the reverse. They should be analyzed dynamically, and the challenge that has to be addressed dynamically also. You will not face the same challenge about economic model, about business model, or about trust when you are in emergence phases, when you try to create your use cases, when you reach the critical mass, or where you are in the enlargement phase. The dynamic of data sharing ecosystem depends on the shape of the value chain, and this is really also important to take into account. You will not deal the same way with SME than with big tech. You will not deal the same depending on the core business model of your participant. It needs to be taken into account. And finally, you need to focus on the different role of the orchestration, can be technique or strategic, and those differences in the orchestration will also depend on the dynamic of data sharing ecosystem. So now I will let the floor to Joël to do some feedback about the economic theater that you had before and to test what we did.
So you had the general framework, and for you, maybe you are thinking, oh, this theory, how to apply, how to deal with it. It was the idea for yesterday, and it was a great moment we share with the 4 participants. You have the name here. Yesterday, and they were coming from 7 countries in Europe. So we have really 4 great projects: Digital TRX, Eurogigant with Pontus X, Dynamo, and Futurecraft open source habitats. We have really 4 very different ways of seeing the thing. And for us, I hope it was the same for the participants, but really we discuss with patience, everybody saying what he thinks and what he's trying to understand about the future. And let's say, it was a shut-a-mouse debate, so I will not say you this one, what it told us this story, this part is really fantastic. The other, maybe there is something we, with our framework, think it could be better. So I will try just to give you some real general sentence, and maybe some of us will understand that some sentence is about one presentation, but I will not give you any wording. It was a purpose of this discussion, the discussion yesterday, is just to be very open. So let's say we have really a heterogeneous group of participants, and as you will see, it can't be a general feedback. But let's say one general feedback is that the technical focus was tricking, and now what do we think? Maybe because we are economists, it's our job, but the focus should now maybe more on value creation. Developing use case which rely on ongoing projects of general interest. The idea is not general interest as we told in French when we say service public. It's not. It's general interest of the companies that are involved in the data sharing. Need to showcase direct benefits. If we want the first, you say the first objective is really to onboard companies, and maybe at the end of the day, have the wording was used yesterday, viral onboarding. But to have that viral onboarding, we need to show to the participants, and the participants, you have to have more and more, that it's their interest to be on the data sharing ecosystem. So, for sure, you need at the beginning technical tools, because it's the first part of the story. But maybe you don't need all the tools just to begin to develop use case, because you will see with the time that maybe some tools were not the very tools you think at the beginning it was the good ones. So you have really a need to check if the ecosystem business model benefits to the participants, align the interest, as Luca was saying previously. Ecosystem should be structured around use case, not the reverse. It's not the first sentence we use, the first time we use that sentence, but really it's important for us to tell you that point. And really thank you for all participants, your efforts and your implications.
So we have now 10 minutes for question for this part of our presentation. I would like first to make very clear that this world of data space, of data sharing ecosystem, we address it in the last 4 years, first in legal terms. Suddenly, we have been invaded in DGA and DA of all kind of legal consideration which were exposed, but it was sometimes difficult to understand why DGA is saying that the data intermediary cannot be a data space participant. So I know that that was a surprise for some of us, including me. And this time of legal focus was accompanied since 4 years with a focus on technicalities, trust framework, trust architecture, and so on and so forth. What I would like is to tell you now, 2024, Helsinki conference is a time for the cornerstone to be installed at the top of the cathedral. And the cornerstone is about the economic explanation of all of that, okay? So this is really what our members in Gaia-X are expecting. So we do have already some work, which is to apply that model in the banking sector, which is starting. And we believe the next 2 or 3 years, 5 years, say, will be about demonstrating that the economics of data sharing makes sense. So in order to illustrate that, I would like to go through a few questions to our panel participants. So the first one, Joël, is for you. We heard yesterday Sébastien Picardat explaining that at one point, which is yesterday, it has been decided to unplug the public funding to Ag Data Hub. At a time, obviously, Ag Data Hub was not ready to work on their own. So in what Sébastien has explained yesterday, Joël, what is the lesson learned you believe are applicable within the model you have described?
Let's say, first, it's a pity. Then, for us, but we discussed with Sébastien since it was one of the first of our interview. So we know the case, and our feeling is really, it's completely what I was trying to explain, what Luca was trying to explain. The issue is that they were on the point to develop business case, but they don't have the money, the long-term money to do it and to onboard really the farmers, let's say, and not only the farmers.
Okay, so thank you for that. Let's now go to try to generalize a little bit what we have heard yesterday. And I was speaking this morning with Eric. He told me that in the request for standardization, which has been given by the European Commission, they would like to see a protocol to check whether the maturity of data space are sufficient for the baby to walk on his own, because if it is not yet there, it's absolutely clear that the baby will fall apart in the first step he or she is doing. Now, you have seen, and this is a question for you, Luca, you have seen that in what has been proposed by Université Paris-Dauphine, they are proposing 4 levels of maturity. Each of them is a set of costs associated with a set of potential benefits. One of the things which is clear, and I hope it was clear yesterday with the presentation of Sébastien, if you plant trees in the autumn and you want to harvest the trees in the next spring, you will not have a tree, okay? So there is an inherent time for trees to grow, which was expressed by you, Luca. So my question to you, do you believe this maturity model is sufficiently well articulated to help the governments which have been funding data space for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, to make it an assessment mechanism which can tell them, probably on a confidential basis, whether the data space is immediately collapsing if they unplug the funding or whether they can be working on its own. What is your view on that, Luca?
So, if I try to be as honest as possible, I'm not sure. I don't think this is a public policy evaluation framework, meaning you will not put the grid on different use cases and like you can say where they are in the long run. But I think it's useful for 2 persons, especially, or 2 type of actors. First of all, it's useful for the orchestrator to try to isolate what type of benefit you will extract from the use cases for participants. So it helps people that are in the ecosystem to understand what they are doing and where they are. But also it could help the policy maker or the European Commission, national government or whatever, to try to map the different data sharing ecosystem and the different use cases. Meaning this is okay to stay at the 2 first level. If it works and if the digitalization, for instance, is needed within the value chain, and if an ecosystem works just only by digitalization, this is okay. But it will allow to map every initiative, and especially to try to address the question of creating a new data sharing ecosystem. For instance, if they notice that this value chain is not digitalized and people come with a project by saying, okay, we will just meet together, share data, and then we will come directly to an innovation, then it can help the policymaker to say, hold on, maybe you should start by digitalization and automation of your process.
Thank you. A last question before we hand over to the next topic, to Joël. So Joël, we heard yesterday that Pontus X, in the context of a UPro-Gigant, have been offering a tool set which is enabling orchestrator to begin to generate cash out of the work they are doing, okay? We heard also Sébastien saying, I have not been cautious enough about the fact that after 3 years, if I do not deliver cash, my banker will be after me, okay? So what is it this is inspiring you?
Okay, I will answer you as an economist. So the question that is behind is the barrier to entry to the value creation. And maybe there is I have another way to present the thing than you. I will say data space are not an alchemist solution. So we need to work, we need to have technical tools, we need to have that use case for data sharing, but the issue is that if it's too costly, it's not possible to go and understand what is going and where are the real value creations. So, the development of tools like we have yesterday all the development or tool from competitors or not completely competitors. I don't know. I'm not a specialist, let's say, for Gaia-X. Or all that people that are on the technical field is fantastic for the data space just because they need to go and try use cases. So my point is that the most we have tools and the most these tools are not too expensive, we will have more results more rapidly and we will be able to build very value-added data systems.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Joël. Thank you, Lucas. I would like now to call on board Jacob and Pierre. So the second topic, which has been addressed now for 2 years by the Gaia-X Institute, is automated compliance by design. You know that this topic is becoming extremely important because it is clear that we cannot check compliance only by adding civil servant to civil servant. Part of it should be done automatically. Now, what is at stake is that we cannot accept, as it has been the case in the past, that self-assessment done by cloud service provider is the only panacea. So by going into automated compliance by design, a concept which has been offered in the first place by Jacob Rehoff, we are getting into something which will be helping installing the new regulation. So I would like to introduce Jacob is driving the Gaia-X Institute, but Jacob, in his other life, is the director of the Lamar Institute in Dortmund, and the Lamar Institute is one of the famous AI institute in Germany, and that, I guess you will develop, Jacob, is also another discussion we need to have from now on about how AI will be benefiting for all that. And the next to Jacob is Pierre Grandlier. So Pierre used to be the CTO of Gaia-X. He is now the Chief Innovation Officer. And as it was mentioned by Lucas, innovation is about technical, but innovation is also about economic, about legal. And therefore, Pierre is now moving to this world of the economics of data sharing to see that this is what the market is expecting. So I guess it's you, Jacob, first.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hubert. Let's see if I can get my slides rolling here. We have a number of appendices. There we go. Right. So first of all, why are we interested in the topic of automated compliance at all? I think I went, did I go one too far? No, I didn't. Okay. So automated compliance is important, as Hubert already touched on, because it's the chief instrument to avoid stifling innovation through regulation. We're talking about automating the process of becoming compliant, as well as the processes that are involved in ascertaining that you are compliant, that is checking compliance. And so automated compliance is really important for making regulation practical. Automation is nice, but unfortunately it has in this context some inherent limitations. It's a hard problem. First of all, you can't eliminate the human being entirely from the process. For example, judges are, even by law, necessary components in the legal system. And also, computer science teaches us that there are certain problems of interest here that can never be solved for reasons of mathematics by a computer. For example, for an arbitrary piece of code to check whether it's secure or safe in all possible regards is not something that can generally be solved by an algorithm. Nonetheless, we can do a lot of things, and I put together my ACBD equation here to try to, in one nutshell, try to put the matter in short form. Automated compliance by design, what does it mean? It means two things: compliance by design and design for automation at the same time. So compliance by design, what does that mean? That means all sorts of stuff that you can already build into the system ex ante, so to speak, a priori, that makes you compliant by construction. So you're compliant by design. A very important place where this can be realized is in the frameworks. For example, the Gaia-X framework, but also the orchestrator, as we talked about yesterday, has a key role to play there. For example, if you had a chance to see the fascinating demo from Pontus X, which I think was enormously impressive, you would have seen there already quite a few kind of advanced techniques being provided, making the system compliant in a number of regards. And this is something you can then once and for all ascertain that this is the case. Also, design for automation, what does that mean? So that means not constructing your system completely arbitrarily, but making it easier for someone to check that the system is compliant. For example, an example of that would be if you write some critical smart contract code, maybe you want to consider writing it in a memory-safe programming language, maybe even in a strongly typed programming language, so that a lot of problems are already taken care of by the compiler itself. So we need to talk also about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Yesterday I asked ChatGPT to give me a picture of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is AI, and this is what it came up with. So I see three main topics here of interest. One, AI as driver for data sharing in data ecosystems. So this is a general topic that also touches on what Joël and Lucas were talking about, and I think one of the next Gaia-X Institute focus points will be that. There are interactions between the Data Acts and the AI Act that need to be understood, and I hope that the Gaia-X Institute will be able to contribute towards clarification of that interface. Certainly, Gaia-X has a key role to play here. I mean, basically, we're seeing like a whole new revolution, actually, of new applications coming up that all feed on data. And so this is a no-brainer that Gaia-X must get into that space. We already heard, actually, from a number of speakers yesterday that people are already thinking about this. And my last point would be AI as a driver for compliance automation, and I'm sure we may have maybe opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. So AI could really be a great help in driving forward compliance automation. And my last point would be my plaidoyer for ramping up in a massive way on EU research and development. We should really be leading in R&D on data spaces and data ecosystems in connection with trustworthiness and data sovereignty. We care about it more than anyone else on this planet. In some sense, I sometimes get a feeling that we're the only ones caring about it these days, but we do care very deeply about it, and we're also pretty good at it. A lot of the research that has flown into, for example, the American big tech companies that, in terms of advanced techniques for making systems trustworthy and secure, a lot of that research has been done by European colleagues. It's not for lack of brain power that we're not ramping up as much as we should. One could actually ask the broader question whether the EU system has in place all the necessary kind of infrastructure for funding this sort of mass-scale research program that I'm calling for. An example would be the question that is floating around: what might a CERN for trustworthy AI possibly look like? And with that question, I will say thank you.
There, I guess I can continue then. Take the opportunity here. So, good morning again. Name is Pierre, was introduced. I'm very happy to be in front of you today. I do have a t-shirt with a target in the back, but that's on purpose. It has been very successful yesterday. Please continue to approach me if you have any question. Before I introduce the topic of automated compliance, I would like to zoom out to later zoom in again better, deeper and deeper and deeper. So the zoom out will be on the a challenge, a question I will have for you on the keywords I've read and heard, which is trusted cloud, trusted data transaction, trusted everything. And I would like to challenge that and maybe shift it a bit to, is that trusted or is that trustworthy? Because trusted is basically, you already gave trust. Trustworthy is more like, it's on you to make the decision whether or not you trust it or not. So that's the first thing. Maybe we can move from trusted, because that's an already given conclusion, and I will challenge that sometimes this is just trustworthy, and it's on you to trust it. The second thing is that how do we achieve that? And if we've heard before risk mitigation, I use the risk management. That's the thing that the industry have been doing for years. And to do risk management, risk mitigation, usually you have two big techniques, technical enforcement, legal enforcement. On the technical enforcement, we have a lot of technology available, trusted execution enclave, multi-party computation, federated learning, in terms of which are used for example, privacy-enhancing techniques. You have also synthetic data and a lot of other technology solutions. On the legal part, you have the contract, and you have something, so now I'm starting to zoom it a bit, conformity assessment, regulation. And conformity assessment, the market of regulation, is huge. So now I'm still at the zoom, very high level, because I'm not talking yet about data. It's several billions of dollars market. When you enter this building, you have the small green thingy on top of the door. Someone had to come and check, yes, you have the security things. For alarms, for fire, for the food you are going to eat today, for the air you breathe now, you have a conformity assessment, you have qualification, you have audit. So this is a huge market. Let me now allow to zoom it a bit. Let's apply that to data spaces, data, and even more specifically to one of the examples I will give, Trust Anchor. Trust Anchor, that will be the party that are part of the right delegation chain of trust within your system. What we have today usually are ecosystems, that verticals. They have their own rules, their own schema, their own rules either per domain or per geographic area. And within that domain, parties, and by parties I'm not saying just peoples, like natural person, but could be an organization, a legal entity, a natural person, a service, a machine. Most of the interaction that we have today are service to service. I prefer to call that service to service than machine to machine. Machine, that's bricks, and usually doesn't communicate. So you need to have software running on the bricks, machines, to make it work. So it's service to service. And it works within the ecosystem. If you want, and you use those common reference, something that we call trust anchor, as a common reference to trust each other. I trust you because the passport have been issued by an organization I feel confident with. That's how it works. And you have the same thing with conformity assessment. I trust that your ISO certification is valid because I understand the scope, because the entity who issued the certification have been accredited by someone I also recognize, and so on. So when you want to have and to build interoperable ecosystems, you need the first one of the, I'm not saying that this is the only things that you have to do. Again, to be pragmatic and concise in time, I'm giving one example. That's the interoperability of the trust anchor here. You need to have registry, which is the technical word where the trust anchor are stored, in common. And then, because, for example, the blue box and the blue one, the red and the blue one share common digital trust anchor, then yes, I can enter the ecosystem, call it A, the red one. I can have a credential from the red one. I can go to the blue one and say, this is my credential I got from there. Do you trust this one? Yes, because both ecosystem authority will recognize each other. And then you can enable cross-data space exchange. Not saying again that this is the entire only solution, only things to do, but that's one of the prerequisites that you have to do. And the automation of that can be done through conformity assessment. Conformity assessment in terms of identity, know your business, know your customer. You have that very well established in the finance domain. And I would like to give an example that's thanks to our colleagues that traveled for a long way through Japan since yesterday. Is it gentleman here? Yes. We have now a first list of, for prototyping, a list of trust service provider for Japan, so that we will start maybe in the next few weeks to implement, between Europe and Japan, so that a Japanese company can be recognized as a legal entity in Europe and the other way around, Europe from Japan. So that's one of the things that we work on. When we talk about conformity assessment, the way you issue a certificate for the food, the fire extinguisher, and so on, and data, and the label certification scheme that you have, for example, in the AI Act, they are using the same vocabulary. And this vocabulary comes from something that has been already standardized at the ISO, conformity assessment. So the way you describe a certification, an attestation, a declaration, an accreditation, the difference between a validation and a verification, those are things that I was not really aware like 6 months ago, but we keep learning. You have an expert inside Gaia-X. This is why, again, well, I need to promote, but please join Gaia-X. We have a lot of experts coming and working on that. And I'm very happy that this specific part is being standardized by Gaia-X at the ISO. So we work on the, also someone from Eclipse Foundation here. So a bit of advertisement for the Eclipse working group. The Eclipse Conformity Assessment Policy and Credential Profile. Again, you can just call it Eclipse CAP. And we've worked with that. We have the first ontology, so the first vocabulary up and running, available. We wait for your feedback. And basically, using that, you can start to express conformity, interoperable conformity vocabulary between data spaces, between ecosystem, and we do think that this is the first step towards automated compliance. With that, then we can start to negotiate, we can start to do policy reasoning on top of that. So this is not the final solution, which is not a good one. But this is definitely one of the enablers to go towards automated compliance, so that, for example, and I will finish on that, if you have, I assume that most of you come from organization. Some of you must have spent hundreds of thousands of euros on conformity assessment for your product, for your data center, for your assessment scheme, for cybersecurity schemes, for your domain in finance, in health, in transport and energy. How do you leverage that? That's exactly what we propose with that. And with that, if you have any question, don't hesitate.
Thank you, Pierre. So, time to wrap up this session. A few lessons learned and maybe one question to Jacob. The few lessons learned is that we have been using in the three domains of legal, technical, and economics the same kind of term, trust, all these things, it's now time to be in a position to explain all these things in such a way that we can teach them to good brain without them to be obliged to spend 10 years of their life to burn their fingers by making mistake, okay? I would say Gaia-X Institute has delivered on economics of data sharing. Gaia-X Institute has delivered when it comes to automated compliance by design. There is a third topic, which is how to teach this complex matter to young lawyers, to young economists, to young technical people in such a way they are prepared to get to the real. The question now for Jacob is a question which was raised to us in our conference in September by Ivo Volman, who is the one guy in the European Commission which has been building all this new regulation. And his question, I found it extremely interesting, and I would like to see whether you have had in September, Jacob, time to think about it. His question was, how can we use AI to analyze data generated by the compliance process? What do you think about that, Jacob?
Yeah, so I think that's a clear, interesting line of thinking. I mean, just to put it briefly, because we don't have that much time, we're looking now at a revolution in computer science, which I have never in my entire career seen the like of, okay? We can now think of doing things that I would have said 10 years ago, you're crazy, if you had proposed that to me. And so I think there's a lot to be done. There's already quite a lot going on. I'm aware of a number of smaller startup companies and other companies that are working towards, trying to automate the process of getting all the paperwork in place to do a lot of the bureaucratic, tedious work associated with compliance and regulation. And so I think, yes, that's a no-brainer. That is going to be a major thing. We've seen 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics and one in chemistry, a while back this year, going to computer science in the field of AI. And there's just so much that can be done. I'm also here now thinking of things like coming up with proofs for limited but important parts of systems like smart contracts, for example. There's a whole new development in AI called neurosymbolic computing, which is about kind of mixing the classical logical forms of reasoning with statistical reasoning methods. And I know that this is a really hot topic in the computer science field. So I see we can think of doing things that I would have thought completely impossible 10 years ago, and a lot of those things are relevant for automating compliance. So the future there is pretty bright.
Thank you, Jacob. So that is the end of our session on Gaia-X Institute. Be ready that next year we will be back in the summit, and probably you can guess that AI will be part of the thing which we will bring to you. What are the relationship between all the effort done in terms of data space and what is emerging now for AI? Thank you.